or maybe you have to be deeply steeped in the history of politics in order to be active. And I will say, nope, you don't need to have those things. Those are nice to have, and if that's your bag, like it is for me, great. But more important is that you authentically see a problem and do your best to educate yourself. Now we are in an information overload era where information's at your fingertips. Getting some information on what you're interested in and then participating and learning as you go is the most important thing you can do. So we try to encourage that for everybody. That is one of the things that I think is most important for us to focus on every single day. There's not a single email that I write or a memo that I'm reading or like a social media post that somebody has drafted where I'm not looking at it through the lens of, would this actually resonate with anybody walking in off the street who doesn't know the issue and hasn't spent any time on it? Can they access it? And I think that's a really important thing for us to continue to try to do, because it's one of the weakest points of our movement in a lot of ways, in that once we get into the space past protests, which is incredible because it creates political space, once we get into the policy realm, we always fall back on these crutches of language that I think are very familiar to us. We always end up in a place where we make issues less accessible. And I think that we do that at our peril. We need to open up the tent and make sure that we're speaking plain English and telling people to really do. So we try to do that all the time. And even on our, for example, we use social a lot, obviously, today. Everybody listening should follow at MBA Coalition on all platforms. And that's where we start to get the word out about what we're thinking about and how we shape our agenda. And we're always sensitive and try to improve every single day on how are we communicating this message in a way that people can understand, where they don't need to take out, Black's Law Dictionary to understand qualified immunity. Instead, just you could break that down and say, police are not held accountable. They should be. And this particular doctrine prevents that from happening. That's the opening frame. Whereas too often we jump into the jargon before explaining the issue.
Right. And just to close out here, I want to just end with a question about the future. Where are we going with all of this, James? Do you see a world where the NBA starts to endorse candidates for office? Do you see the coalition expanding its portfolio of issues? Where do you see political and policy advocacy for the NBA going in the next few years?
So the way that I will frame this will sound like a boring answer, but I will try to give you like the view that I have in my head, which is the most exciting thing possible here, that the work sustains. And this is I think there's a tendency for our advocacy work or movement work or whatever it is to burn hot and fast, because it's really easy. Well, it's not easy, but it often happens that when you jump into an issue, there's a lot of passion around the issue, rightfully so, because somebody's seen an injustice. They get engaged in the process, rightfully so, because that's the way that we shape our society and self-govern. And then you hit the inevitable roadblocks of policy and politics, and then we see that kill the interest, and people feel like their voices don't matter. The most important thing that this coalition can do is remind people that their voices do matter, and that for every single voice that was raised in 2020, including all the players who stood up, like not just in the NBA, but across leagues and around the world, and all the people who were watching and who were tuned in and who demanded that we as a society do better on racial justice. The work that we do day in and day out to try and move policy to create something replicable that we can rely on, that protects people, that prevents bad things from happening, which is really at its base what policing reform is about, what criminal justice reform is about, that vindicates rights. That's what voting rights advocacy is about. If we are able to help people understand that every time they raise their voice, it does matter, and so that they continue to do it and that they continue to participate, that is perhaps the most revolutionary thing. It's not that we bring celebrity and athlete voice into this space, because it's been there. It's about using that to create more space for other people to come in and realize that you can do this over time and you don't have to burn hot and fast to have an impact, that you can stay engaged and stay in touch and have your day job or go to school and be a whole human being while also being concerned about these issues. and make a difference. That's what collective action is really about. And to me, if we do our work well at the coalition, we'll demonstrate that over the course of time, that bringing people into this process and demystifying it a little bit and making them feel more comfortable with it, that truly contributes to the betterment and welfare of everybody in our community and our society.
Ending on a high note. I love that. James Cadogan, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate your time.
Really great to be with you, Elliot. Thanks for taking the time.